Today we're going to add some access points to the upper levels of our sewer system by making some wooden ladders and some modular staircases. So the supplies we'll need today for our ladders are going to be a couple of these little cocktail sticks. I got these at a restaurant supply store, but you can also find them online in a variety of different places. As well as a few toothpicks to be the rungs of our ladder. Now for our stairs, we're going to use a tongue depressor, a few popsicle sticks or craft sticks, and a couple more of those cocktail sticks. Alright, so now that we have our materials, let's go ahead and get started with our stairs. Alright, to get things started, we're going to take our tongue depressor and lining it up on the mat here, I'm just going for a 45-degree angle, and I'm just going to mark out a series of lines at 3/8 of an inch separation. So each of these lines is going to be 3/8 of an inch apart from the lines around it, and then once I've got that drawn out, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees like so, and draw it out again. And these are going to be all of the outlines for where we're going to place our steps. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now, it doesn't matter which side you do this on, but you're going to want to pick which side is going to be the side that the steps are facing up on. And once you've decided that, you can go ahead and cut out very carefully all of the notches where the steps are going to go. Now, occasionally you'll have a situation like this where one breaks off. I just use a little bit of gel super glue and then stick it back on, give it a couple of seconds, and it's ready to keep working. Alright, I will cut the rest of these notches off camera, but once we have them all notched out, we're going to cut this in half, and it's going to give us two of these. These are going to be kind of the guides for where all of our stairs are going to go. Now, I want a little bit of extra strength for them, so I'm going to attach a couple of craft sticks, one on each of the guides. Now these are just going to be some little side supports to kind of add a little bit of extra reinforcement and help keep the stair steps in place once we attach them. And then I'm just going to use a couple of binder clips to kind of clamp everything into place and let the glue fully dry. It's a process that takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Alright, while that's drying, I'm going to take the couple of cocktail sticks, and I'm just going to trim a section off of this large paddle here, and then trim it down to just under 2 inches in length. And this is going to essentially be some support legs for the back of our stairs. Alright, there's one. I'll cut the second one off camera. Okay, now that our guide is dry, I'm going to very carefully trim the sides so that all of the areas that are going to be touching the ground or the stairs are kind of free and clear and kind of flush with all the pieces. Now don't cut the sections that are around the notches, because we're going to need those to kind of guide the stairs into place. But for the top step, I'm going to leave a little bit of an extra space so that the stair has a little bit of room to attach, but it's also a little flush. Now I'm going to carefully trim a section off of the top rung. This is just going to be a little bit of a gap for the back support legs. Just a space for them to slot into and kind of glue into position. Once I've got that, I'll attach a little bit of glue and then clip the stair into place. And then using a binder clip, I will attach everything and just let it dry so that it doesn't kind of come out a little wobbled or out of position. Okay, so I've got both of these done now. They're dry and pretty stable. So we can start the process of adding in our steps. Now this is just a pretty simple process of apply a little bit of glue into the top of each of the steps on the guide, and then starting at the bottom step of the stairs, I'm just going to put one side into position, hold it in place, tack it into position on the other side, and then just lay in each step starting from the bottom, working my way up. Alright, now this can be very wobbly at this point, so make sure it's fully dry before moving on to the next step. Now I'm going to take this and this is just a little bit of an offcut from one of the cocktail sticks. I'm just going to apply a little bit of glue and then on the back slot it into place in between the legs right up under the top step. Now this doesn't do anything visually, it just gives a little bit of extra reinforcement for the legs to kind of help keep them in place and keep them from breaking free. Now this step is optional, you do not have to do this, but if you want a little bit of extra reinforcement, I took a 1-inch wide craft stick and clipped it to be the length of the bottom of the stairs, and I'm just going to attach a little bit of some tacky glue along the bottom of each of the 4 points on the stairs and just kind of slot this in between all of the supports for the stairs. And once this dries, it'll be a lot more stable and a lot more user-friendly on the table. Alright, with our stairs done, it's time to start our ladders. Now this is a pretty quick process, and I'll just kind of leave it as one take going through and I won't cut anything away. But I started out by just marking out it ended up being a 60-degree angle on the large paddle section of the cocktail stick, and I'm just going to trim a little bit of the edges here or there. Now the stick itself I trimmed to about 3 inches, and that seemed like a pretty good length for a ladder going up to a 2-inch high point. Then using the same 3/8 spacing method, I marked out where all the ladder rungs were going to go, and then poked in a quick little pilot hole with a sharp pointed tool. Using the first one as a guide, I marked and then trimmed a second cocktail stick, just so that everything stays roughly the same length. Now it's time to drill the holes, but to do that we're going to start by clamping our 2 pieces together, with the one that has the holes marked on the top. Then using a 3/16 drill bit, I carefully drilled out the holes, and doing it this way means that all the holes will line up perfectly. So clamping them together means that I don't have to hope that the holes on the second stick match up to the holes on the first stick and then end up having to re-drill or redo a whole bunch of work. Now I'm doing this by hand because I happen to have a screwdriver bit that fits into a socketed screwdriver that I had on hand. But you can do this with a hand drill or kind of a drill press or something like that. I would just use a lower speed so that you don't run the risk of the piece flying out of your hands or the wood catching the bit in a bad way and tearing it apart. As always, make sure that you're practicing safety first. Don't drill into your hands, don't put your fingers on the other side of the hole. Make sure that everything is secured down before you use any power tools. Okay, so all the holes have been drilled. I'm going to take a quick second, dust off my mat, and now we can start cutting our ladder rungs. Now this is just a quick, simple process. I'm just marking out a 1-inch length on each of the toothpicks here, and then just doing a quick trim. And as you can see, they kind of slot nicely together onto the ladder. So I'll just quickly clip up all the rest of the toothpicks. And this ladder ended up having 7 rungs. Why 7? Well, the better question is, why not? Then using a little bit of tacky glue, I'm just slotting all the toothpicks into place. Now I will say, as a happy coincidence, the spacing on the ladder rungs did help to kind of allow models to slot onto the ladder and actually remain suspended. I wouldn't try it with the heavy pewter models that we used to be able to get a hold of. They won't really stay in place. Now, I wanted the ladder to be a relatively consistent width, so using the grid on my mat, I just kind of repositioned the rungs a little bit by kind of squeezing the sides together or pulling them apart, just to kind of make sure that I had the right spacing that I wanted. Alright, so the ladder looks pretty good, and it kind of clings to the wall as it's propped up against it. So now we can take a sharp X-Acto knife and very carefully trim all of our toothpicks down so that everything is nice and flush on both sides of the ladder. Alright, quick little sand to make sure I didn't miss anything, and our ladder is done. The whole process took about 20 minutes. Alright, so now that those are all built, it's time to get painting. Now I ended up making a few ladders and a couple sets of stairs, and then took them outside and gave them all a base coat in some flat Krylon brown camouflage. And then I do a nice little overbrush with some raw sienna. I'm focusing on the top and the sides, mostly because the bottom is going to be a very hard to reach place, and it's going to be naturally shadowed anyway. So focusing on the top kind of gives that nice kind of appearance that I want. I am going to paint a little bit of the bottom on the stairs, but I'm not really worried about getting full coverage. And then for the ladder, I'm focusing again on the outsides and the front and back, not so much on the inside of the 2 outer sections, since those are going to be harder to reach and a little bit more shadowed naturally. And then for the rungs, it's just a quick few passes with the overbrushing, just to kind of impart the coloration. Then using a little bit of warm gray, I pick out all the edges just to give a little bit of a highlight to the ladders as well as the stairs. Now, if you want these to look a little bit more worn and used, I would say focus the dry brush around the dead center of the ladder rungs or the stair steps. That'll kind of help to imply that those are the areas that are touched most often by the miniatures, kind of signifying that these are where the wear and tear of the boots or shoes or feet or hooves or whatever your models happen to have would come in contact with most. And just like that, episode 9 is finished. Alright, I've got a quick little setup here. I tried to show how the models could stand inside the rungs of the stairs and the ladders. They fit pretty well, and I didn't really run into any issues of things tipping over or falling, though models with larger bases would definitely have a little bit more of an interesting time fitting into the spaces. But all in all, I'd say everything worked out pretty well. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you very much for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe for future content, comment down in that comment section, let me know how you're liking the series, and we will see everyone next episode.